Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're going to be doing a deep dive into the life of Maggie Lena Walker. She's a fascinating figure in American history and really turned financial literacy into a tool for social change.
Yeah, it's amazing. Just thinking about the historical context, she was born in Richmond, Virginia, right as the Civil War was ending, and then lived through the rise of Jim Crow laws.
So she saw some pretty intense social and economic upheaval firsthand, and it seems like that really informed her commitment to social justice.
It definitely did. It wasn't just theoretical for her, you
Yeah.
know. She saw how economic empowerment could really change lives. I mean, think about it. She was delivering laundry for her mother as a young girl.
And through that work, she really got to see the disparities between Black and white communities just in their everyday lives.
Right, like how those inequalities actually played out, and that experience really stuck with her.
I can imagine. So it was more than just about like personal finance for her. It was about understanding those systems that created and sustained those inequalities.
Exactly. And joining the Independent Order of St. Luke when she was just 14 was a real turning point. That organization was all about empowering African Americans financially.
I've heard a little bit about them, but can you tell us more about what they did?
Yeah, they were offering things like life insurance and death benefits, which were often denied to Black people at the time.
Wow, so they were really providing a crucial safety net in a system that was designed to keep people vulnerable.
Yeah, exactly. And Maggie Walker didn't just join, she became a leader in the organization. She eventually rose to the position of Grand Secretary.
So she saw the potential of this organization to create real change, and she took on a leadership role to make that happen.
Exactly. She had this like three-pronged approach to creating change.
Oh, interesting. What were they?
Well, first she wanted to invest in financial education for young people.
Makes sense. Start them young. Right.
Exactly. And then she wanted to expand the reach of the organization itself, bring more people into the fold.
Okay, that's two. What was the third?
This one's really fascinating. She wanted to use the power of media to raise awareness.
Media. That's interesting. This was the early 1900s, right? What kind of media?
Yeah, in 1902, she founded a newspaper called the St. Luke Herald.
Really? So she was kind of like an early financial influencer, right? Using media to reach people.
That's a great way to put it. She was way ahead of her time in that sense. And she used it not only to expose injustices like lynching, but also to share important financial knowledge with the community.
Wow. So she was really hitting all the angles.
She was. She understood that knowledge is power, especially when it comes to finances.
This is all super inspiring, but I'm curious, did it actually lead to real change? Like, what were the concrete outcomes of her efforts?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. This is where her legacy really shines. In 1903, she established the St. Luke Penny Savings Bank. This made her the first African-American woman in the U.S. to charter and preside over a bank.
Wow, that is a huge accomplishment, especially back then when women, let alone Black women, are often completely shut out of the financial system.
It was a direct challenge to the discriminatory practices that were so prevalent at the time. Think about it. Black people were routinely denied loans. They were charged outrageous interest rates, or they were just flat out refused service. The St. Luke Penny Savings Bank offered a real alternative.
Yeah, it was more than just an alternative. It was about building something powerful within the Black community itself.
Yeah, absolutely. It allowed Black people to save, invest, and obtain loans to buy homes and start businesses, all within this framework of trust and shared values.
So she was creating this whole economic ecosystem designed to uplift Black people.
Exactly. And in 1905, she took it even further and founded the St. Luke Emporium.
What was that?
It was a department store, and it aimed to keep those dollars circulating within the Black community, like this whole interconnected system designed to support Black success.
That's incredible. So she really took something as simple as saving pennies and turned it into a whole movement. What happened to the bank, though? Did it survive?
It actually did. The St. Luke Penny Savings Bank operated for over a century, which is pretty amazing.
Wow.
It finally closed in the early 2000s, but its impact on the community was just undeniable.
It's so important to remember these stories. We often hear about the struggles faced by Black communities during that period, and rightfully so, but Maggie Walker's story, it offers a different perspective. It's a story of resilience and about individuals who are actively fighting for change and building a better future.
Yeah, and her story also reminds us that even in the face of huge adversity, there's always hope, and that financial literacy can be a powerful tool for social justice and empowerment.
It's so inspiring how Maggie Lena Walker was able to make such real change, even with everything going on around her.
Yeah.
But I'm curious about something. How did she deal with the emotional and psychological impact of living in a society that was so unfair?
That's a great question. And, it's important to remember that the financial disparities she was fighting against weren't just about money. They were tied to something we haven't really talked about yet, which is race-based trauma.
Well, that's an interesting point. Can you explain a bit more about what you mean by race-based trauma?
Sure. It's basically the mental and emotional wounds that are caused by racism and discrimination. And those wounds can actually be passed down through generations.
Wow. So it's not just about like individual acts of prejudice, but it's this collective trauma that shapes how entire communities see themselves.
Exactly. And this trauma can really have a big impact on people's lives. It affects their relationships, their health, and yeah, even their financial well-being.
Yeah, I can see how that would make sense. Like if you're constantly struggling financially because of these systemic barriers, it can create this feeling of hopelessness and lack of control. And that can make it even harder to break out of that cycle.
Exactly. It's like this vicious cycle. The trauma of racism leads to financial hardship, and then that reinforces the feelings of powerlessness, and it just keeps going. But here's where Maggie Walker's work becomes even more powerful.
I'm listening. How did she address this deeper level of trauma?
Well, she understood that financial literacy wasn't just about teaching people practical skills like how to balance a checkbook. It was also about healing those deeper wounds. By giving people the tools to succeed financially, she was also helping them to feel more empowered, more in control of their lives.
So it was almost like providing the tools for financial success was a way to give people the tools to heal and be more resilient.
Exactly. And by building a successful bank and businesses that were owned and operated by African Americans, she was directly challenging the idea that Black people were inferior, which was so common back then.
It's almost like she was rewriting the story, showing that Black people were not only capable, but that they could thrive even in a system that was trying to hold them back.
Yeah. And that message is still so relevant today. It reminds us that financial empowerment is not just about money. It's about building confidence and resilience and creating a sense of hope for the future.
And we're still dealing with the legacy of racism and its impact on financial well-being. I mean, we see it in the wealth gaps that still exist and the discriminatory lending practices and the lack of access to good financial education in a lot of communities.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's true. So the question is, what can we learn from Maggie Walker's approach? How can we use her wisdom to deal with the challenges we face today?
That is the million-dollar question. Where do we even begin?
Well, one important thing is to recognize the role that race-based trauma plays in keeping those financial disparities in place. We can't just focus on teaching people how to budget. We need to address those deeper emotional and psychological barriers that are preventing them from achieving real financial well-being.
So creating safe spaces for people to talk about their experiences, providing financial counseling that's culturally sensitive, and also challenging the systems that create inequality.
Exactly. And, we can also look to Maggie Walker's model of community-based solutions for inspiration. She didn't wait for someone else to come in and fix the problem. She built the institutions and the support systems that her community needed to succeed.
It's about giving people a sense of ownership and agency. Instead of just imposing solutions from the outside, what else can we learn from her?
I think it's important to be really mindful of the language we use when we talk about financial literacy. It's not helpful to shame or blame people for their financial situation. Instead, we need to focus on building trust and offering support and encouraging hope.
It's about empowering people to take control of their own financial stories, just like Maggie Walker did for her community.
That's a great way to put it. Her legacy reminds us that financial empowerment isn't just about dollars and cents. It's about human dignity and social justice and creating a world where everyone has the chance to thrive.
What an amazing story. It makes you wonder, what are some specific examples from her work that we can draw inspiration from? Like, how can we actually take action today?
Yeah, that's a great question. As we're wrapping up our deep dive into Maggie Lena Walker's life, I'm wondering, what are some things we can do right now? What can we take away from her story and apply it to our own communities to promote financial empowerment and social justice?
Well, one thing that really stands out to me is her focus on mentorship. She was so dedicated to teaching young people about financial matters. And I think we can all be mentors in our own way.
Okay, I like that. But what would that look like?
I mean, it doesn't have to be anything complicated. It could be as simple as, teaching your kids about saving money or just having open conversations about finances with your friends and family, or maybe volunteering with a financial literacy program or supporting organizations that provide financial education in communities that need it most. Yeah, I think there's this weird thing where people don't really like to talk about money.
Yeah.
It's like this taboo subject. But you're right that silence just makes the problem worse.
Exactly. By talking about it more openly, we create space for learning and sharing and supporting each other. It becomes less scary and mysterious.
And another thing that struck me was how Maggie Walker really pushed for Black-owned businesses and financial institutions. Is that something we can still do today?
Oh, absolutely. Supporting Black-owned businesses and financial institutions is a powerful way to directly contribute to the economic empowerment of communities that have been historically excluded and marginalized.
It's almost like a form of activism in a way, right?
Mm,
Like we're voting with our dollars to support businesses that we believe in.
I love that. Voting with your dollars, yeah. But it's important to remember that it's not just about individual wealth, it's about building collective power and creating a system where everyone has a real chance to achieve financial security and well-being.
And that's where policy comes in, right? We have to advocate for policies that promote equal access to things like education and affordable housing and fair lending practices.
Absolutely. What we do as individuals matters, but we also have to address the bigger systemic issues that create and perpetuate financial inequality.
So it's like a multi-pronged approach: education, community investment, and policy advocacy.
Exactly. And remember, Maggie Walker didn't change her community overnight. It was a lifetime of dedicated effort. She really believed in the power of working together to make a difference.
Yeah, her story is such a good reminder that even small actions can have a ripple effect. Like they can lead to big changes that last for generations.
And that's the key takeaway, I think. We all have a part to play in building a more just and equitable world.
Well said. It's been amazing learning about Maggie Lena Walker's life. I'm feeling inspired and ready to do my part.
Me too.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope that Maggie Lena Walker's story will inspire you to think about how financial empowerment can make a difference in your own community. Remember, even small steps can create big change.